Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here. I'm coming at you from a makeshift studio in the Denver, Colorado area. We're ready to talk some SEC basketball. My man Blake saw a lot more of it than I did yesterday due to my travel, but boy, was I shocked to see a score or two in particular from Sunday, Blake.
I don't know what you're talking about. South Carolina's 5-0.
I'm afraid you do.
But maybe that's what you're talking about. We'll start there. The Gamecocks are 5-0. I still don't know what you're talking about in the previous part. Maybe we'll get to before we wrap up. But let me start with South Carolina because it's not been often since we started this channel that we have led an SEC basketball video with South Carolina. One in particular I can remember was the time they beat Kentucky last year at Rupp. But other than that, we haven't really led with South Carolina too much. But it's deserved here because they're 5-0 now. And we said it was a great opportunity. Felt like the matchups were there against DePaul and, it would be a tough game against Grand Canyon. But listen, this team just keeps doing it. I think, got off to a good start. They were up 11, I think, midway through the second half. And BJ Mack goes for 27 points. Maybe we talked about it, right? Like, they get a win like this. Talon Cooper only scores a couple points. Michi Johnson had 9. Wright again off the bench gives him 10. Studi had 12. But BJ Mack was just really good in this game. And I don't know, man. This South Carolina team, again, this happens every season. There's just one of those teams that really surprised you. I don't think we would have been surprised if, South Carolina had jumped up a little bit early in the season, but I don't know that many people expected them to jump to this level through 5 games. And here they are. I'm just so impressed with them right now. And again, maybe Lamont Paris was onto something when he said everybody's undervaluing us. He knew because they have gotten off to a really good start. 2 winnable games coming up against Notre Dame and George Washington. Then they got a fun away game at Clemson. Looks a lot more exciting now based on the way Clemson started. They're 4-0. Just beat a good Boise State team, I thought, yesterday by 17 or so. And so, the Gamecocks, undefeated at this point in the SEC season.
I have a couple of thoughts for you on South Carolina, but first, reminder, the holiday season is off and rolling with NFL in full stride and the NBA and NHL hitting midseason form. BetOnline is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info with up-to-the-minute sports wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. BetOnline is a top spot for everything pro and amateur sports, not just the Big Four. BetOnline has info available at your fingertips, both desktop and mobile access at any time for almost any sport that is played, from MMA to international soccer. Head to BetOnline today. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, you remember, of course, when Frank Martin was at South Carolina, it was a defensive, grind-you-oriented approach, and it takes some time to unwind that at a place like South Carolina, where you're not going to get a bunch of blue-chip recruits right off the bat, although Lamont Paris did score with one a year ago. It's going to take a little more than that. And the BJ Mack transfer has been such a key one for them. They haven't had just a get it to a guy and let him score big numbers guy in a while, it seems like to me. And he's that guy. The other one, Miles Studi, who's had a pretty nice start. He was a 3-point weapon for Vanderbilt, but the other stuff, I think those two guys have given them a whole lot so far.
Yep, they have. And like you said, it's a lot more experienced team. And that's definitely played a factor because, every game except the first one has been close in some way, shape, or form. 82-53 over Upstate. Every other game's been decided by 10 points or less, and they just keep finding ways to win these games. And so, it's impressive, And again, I feel like they've got not just one guy, but you got multiple guys who can step up on any night and score 15 plus probably, just given the background of some of these guys. And so, props to the Gamecocks. They are proving many people wrong right now, including us, because guarantee you they're not going to be number 14 in our power rankings this week like they were before the season. And quite frankly, they could jump up quite high, I think, based on how some other teams are playing. So,
all right, we'll continue with the good news portion of this one. Mississippi State remains unbeaten with a 66-57 win over Northwestern. This team was 8 of 22 from three, a little bit off of what State's been. But if you shoot 36% from three, the way this team defends, you're going to win a lot of games. And this team has shot and it has defended, and it's got contributions from a lot of people without Tolu Smith so far.
Well, I mean, let's keep in mind, this was the worst three-point shooting team in the country last year. I know Mississippi State fans get tired of me saying that, but we have to keep bringing it up because of how much progress they've made. When we're talking about them going 8 of 22 from three, and to some, that may be a disappointment because they started going 10 of 26, 13 of 39 in their first two games, hit a combined 23 threes. In the first two games of the season, hit 7 against North Alabama, 5 against Washington State, but then, bounce back up percentage-wise in this game. If they can continue to offer that kind of shooting threat, they are going to be hard to beat because they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. That's no surprise. We knew that was going to be the case. Now, we did say without Tolu Smith, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like, but they are 5-0. They win the Hall of Fame tip-off, whatever it was. And it feels like, this is going to do nothing but be valuable for them once he does come back in January or whenever, early February, whenever it is. Because all these guys are getting valuable experience, and you're just continuing to see kind of the opportunity that's there, right? And I just keep looking at this team. I'm like, man, you sort of look at the different ways they can beat people, whether it's the defense. They've gotten Shaquille Moore back the past 3 games. He scored 8 points each in those. Like, that's not a ton, right? But it's something because he's someone who's been there, so the experience helps. And so, yeah, I mean, all these other guys we talked about during the season already, just kind of what they're bringing to the table. We've always mentioned, Cam Matthews, someone that's just been kind of undervalued probably at times just in terms of his, importance to this team. And you just keep going down the line, whether it's Bell, whether it's, someone like Trey Ford. I know he hadn't scored as much in the last couple of games. He did in the first 2, but they've got a lot of guys who are stepping up in Tolu Smith's absence. And I think once they get him back, it's only going to help in terms of like getting these guys these sort of minutes. And of course, it deepens your rotation a bit when he steps back into the lineup. So 5-0, they got a team that's currently unbeaten against SEC teams. Nicholls coming up next. So yeah, great opportunity here with the schedule, the way it shapes out for Mississippi State. So
I don't think we've spent any time talking about Josh Hubbard. Like, I don't remember talking about him preseason. Look, if you were in this league and unless you're a top 50 recruit with the talent this league gets, you're not on a lot of people's radar unless you're doing a deep dive. This kid was a 3 or 4 star recruit, depending on where you looked. Like, he gets 29 points on Sunday. That's the second time he's been over 20, did it against UT Martin. In the 4th straight game, he's been in double figure scoring. I mean, we've talked about how Dalton Connect was a guy that Tennessee needed, and sometimes you just need that part that you've been missing to take your team to a different level. With the shooting struggles this team's had that you have outlined and we have outlined many times, that is a piece that is really doing them some wonders right now, because he scored about 40% of their points yesterday, and he did it in 27 minutes.
Yeah, you just proved the point, because I was like, I thought I mentioned Josh Herbert at the start, but I didn't. Like, yeah, how did we didn't lead with that? But yes, like, again, that's helping the 3-point shooting, and that's adding to, like we said, if this team just had that dynamic, they would be dangerous. And remember, we're talking about them without their best player. And so they are already dangerous without him on the floor. And it's because of what Hubbard's done, stepping in, like you said, scored at least 12 points in 4 of the 5 games this season. And yeah, I mean, just adding that shooting touch, giving yourself some sort of threat from the perimeter. That's all we said this team really needed to be, an elite type team last year. That's where it was frustrating to watch, because you just knew they could not make shots consistently. They were a bad free throw shooting team. They were just a bad, shooting team, period. But this year they've improved in both those areas. Having a Hubbard helps, having some of these other guys who are contributing there. So yeah, Mississippi State's one of the best teams in the SEC right now.
Okay, LSU has been a team of concern. The opening night win over Mississippi Valley State, that's probably the worst team in Division I or close to it. And then they follow it up by losing to Nicholls on their home floor, losing to Dayton in a game they blew. And I'm like, this might be the worst team in the league. They get a win over North Texas, which was a nice win to have, especially needed at the time. And then they get Wake yesterday and beat them 86-80. It's starting to feel a little bit like maybe, I'm not going to say we buried LSU, but I think a week ago we had them last in our power rankings, and we'll see if they stay there or not. But Will Baker's had 2 huge games for them now, and that included going for 23 points in the win over Wake Forest on Sunday.
Yeah, curious to see who is last this week in our power rankings. Those will probably come out on Tuesday. I'm very curious to see who's there because I think we may have some differing opinions on who does go there. It comes down to this. We said it. If this team's going to win games, there's 2 people that are going to drive this. It's going to be Will Baker and Jordan Wright. And that's really all you need. Like, and I don't mean that like you're not going to win 10 SEC games with just those guys. But like, if you're just giving yourself a chance to win in every game you played and continue to play, like you've got to have those 2 guys. They've got to score double figures because on a team like this, like that is the starting point. And look, that's what we said. I mean, mentioned Jordan Wright. He's gone for 12 and 15 in the last 2 games and wins. Had 11 and 4 against Dayton and Nichols. Talked about Baker. I said after that game, I was like, hey, he scores 2 points against Nichols. That can't happen. Scores 10 points against Dayton. So combines for 12 in those 2. But then he comes back with 16 and 23. That's what it's going to take for this team to win games this year. And it really is, I think, as simple as those 2 guys have got to score consistently. Otherwise, yes, like look at what Jalen Reed's done. He's had some big games, and stepped up when those 2 guys, had down type games against those 2 teams they lost to. He scores 12 yesterday to kind of give him a little boost there too. So, yeah, I mean, still a lot to figure out with this team, but I think the way they bounce back and think about how they lost the Dayton game right after losing to Nichols, and then they lose just a heartbreaking game to Dayton. Then to bounce back with 2 close wins, that will definitely improve your confidence. I don't think those are 2 bad teams at all, North Texas and Wake Forest. So, yeah, a huge step in the right direction for LSU. Still got a ways to go, like many other teams in the SEC, but that was a huge development to get those 2 wins.
All right, Blake. You got your earmuffs ready.
Are we going to Georgia next?
Well, we can if you like.
Yeah, I'd like to go to Providence in Georgia.
Let's talk about Providence in Georgia. What do you have on Providence in Georgia?
Well, Providence, I think, they were shorthanded in that game, right? And I mean, Georgia, as I keep saying, I think we need to keep Georgia's record in context a little bit. They're 2-3, but they've probably played the toughest schedule of anybody to this point. They have played Oregon, Wake Forest, Miami, and Providence. Miami, by the way, I hope you guys listen when we talked about Miami because that team is Final Four-esque. I mean, they are that starting 5, which we're going to get to see that next Tuesday when they play at Kentucky. Go ahead and circle that one. That's going to be must-see TV there, I think, in that game. But, yeah, I mean, Georgia, look, I think Georgia is the kind of team that are they outside the bottom 4 in the SEC right now? No. Can they get above that? Yes. Can they get far above that? I just don't know. I think there's still a lot they're going to have to improve in to get there, right? And we've talked about the rebounding in some of these games. And, I think offensively at times it's just, look, this was a close game. I mean, you really think about it, right? I want to say the largest margin in this game was actually the final score, 71-64, so 7-point margin. But, they were right there with a chance. And I think right now that works because this was not a team that we just expected to be great from the start. But I think they are giving themselves a little bit, of a chance in some of these games. Obviously, getting the win over Wake Forest was big. They rallied for a bit against Oregon as we saw it towards the end. Now, Miami, just a different beast. But I think beyond that, I'm curious to see how this team develops because they're another one that if you look at kind of the rest of their non-conference schedule, not a lot of meat on the bone there, but that may be okay for a team like this because they really need to build some confidence. They need to kind of build some chemistry together and all that. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that they've gotten some of these games out of the way early. And again, it's nice to get that Wake Forest win. Otherwise, you're just sitting on a win over NC Central, which doesn't mean a whole lot. So curious to see how they build over the next month or so because, once you get into SEC play, there's no let up. And so we'll see what happens with the Dogs.
I think the bright spot there, Noah Thomason is coming along. He leads them in scoring with 19 points, although it took 21 shots to do it. So that's not so great. But what did he get, like 4 points in the open or something like that? And he was a guy I think we thought would really be a huge factor. And he's been up and down. He's gone 16 his first game, 21 against Wake, 2 against North Carolina Central, which that they won that one without him doing much. 14 against Miami, now 19. So there's been a little bit up and down, but it's like Georgia's always got that one guy that takes a lot of shots, and it looks like it's going to be him.
I was just about to go back to that. I know you picked on who was it last year? Was it Terry Roberts?
Yes.
You picked on Terry Roberts last year. I feel like Kario Kundo was picked on at one point before that. But here's the thing: if he's not taking shots, I mean,
yeah,
and it ain't got a lot of options.
He's always Blue
Cane, this superstar offensive players. So again, I think this is a team that's a work in progress. So I don't mind him taking that many shots because you got to get that somewhere, and so he's one of the better options, if not the best option to do it. So yeah, again, I think we'll see. Offensively, they're just work in progress for the Bulldogs. All right, Chris. So that'll do it for this edition of SEC Reaction. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. And yeah, a lot of great stuff. Feast week here in SEC basketball.
Feast week.
Yeah.
Some teams feasted more than others on Sunday.
Presented by Bet Online. Thanks for watching. All right, let's just get to it. Yeah,
this is killing you.
Well, it's interesting because Missouri fans had fun with Arkansas when they lost at home to Greensboro the other day, and I saw it on Twitter and everything, and I know it probably had some fun in the comments as well. But now it's Missouri's turn. This one a little worse than the Hogs, I think, to say the least. But yeah, Jackson State 73, Missouri 72. Boy, that is not one that you expected to see after this team just rallied from 20 at Minnesota. They come back, and man, you want to talk about the SEC. If you list some games this year, right? Vandy loses to Presbyterian, LSU loses to Nichols, Missouri now loses to Jackson State, who was 0-5 coming into this thing. Played the gauntlet, and I think somebody put the stat out yesterday. Jackson State didn't play a home game until January the 6th, which we know how this works, right? Like they go to Georgetown, Arkansas State, Houston, keep going. They got to go to the Zags. They got to play Northwestern. But we know how it works with some of these teams in the SWAC. Still, it does not excuse the loss. My client can say what he wants about best 0-5 team out there, but hey, I am willing to take a step back here, Missouri fans, and let you know that, yes, you should be frustrated after this loss because these are just the kind that you just don't want to see, I think, because it takes a hit, right? Like in terms of just the confidence in the program after all the momentum you built last year. You had the disappointing performance against Memphis a couple weeks ago. You get all the momentum back with a win at Minnesota, and now you just come back down again after this loss. And so, I mean, it's pretty simple. You can't turn the ball over as much as they did. You have to capitalize on free throws. And look, they only missed 4 free throws in the game, right? But you think about the importance of some of those late. They're still playing a lot of guys, and I saw some people frustrated at that they're still playing a lot. I told you, I said, I think if they had 18, they'd play 18, especially in these early games. And so, yeah, I mean, I go back to this. Did I think they would lose to Jackson State? No, but we've talked about this, Chris. I said this team they're not there yet. I think you could clearly see that. You have been able to clearly see that early in the season. The Memphis game was the one that really stood out where they have still got some things they got to get better at. Minnesota game for a good stretch there. You're thinking the same thing where it's, they're down 20 to Minnesota, who I don't think is that great of a team. And so the consistency is not there yet, and they are still figuring some things out. And it is as evident as can be after this game right here, where you know how this works too. If you give a team like this a chance and you let them hang around, we have seen this so many times. You just can't do that. You've got to be able to just sort of put the foot on the gas and go. And I just felt like Missouri never got there in this game because, even they're up, 7-6 or something with a minute to go, something like that. But then just, Jackson State makes all the plays. Like Dennis Gay said, they get the loose balls. Missouri they don't do those kind of things in this game. And that gets you beat. And so very disappointing loss for the Missouri Tigers in this game. And, I think there's just there is still a clear difference, right? Think back to last year. Remember they played games close early? I mean,
Yeah.
it was Southern Indiana, Penn, those kind of games they had early on that were just close games. Like even SEMO was close last year. But you felt like in those games you had what? You had a Kobe Brown, you had a Demoy Hodge, just complete sort of take over and win the game. Not saying that can't be Nick Honor long term, because he did it against Minnesota with some big shots. He, leading scorer in this game, all that. But I just think right now you're really trying to figure out this rotation. And unfortunately, when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys play 10 or more minutes, it's just you're going to get different pairings that just aren't connecting. And that led to a loss like this that really dings your NCAA tournament resume. This is not an NCAA tournament team right now. Let's not try to sugarcoat this. Like they're not. I think they dropped to 84th in KenPom, which would be 12th in the SEC. Still significantly above Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, but below Georgia, below LSU. Again, it's just a KenPom rating, but it's not an ideal start in a game like this. Kind of showcases it. These are different teams, folks. I know that the magical run happened last year and all that, but this team still got a ways to go. And you could even see that in some of the wins they've had already this season. And unfortunately, this just kind of comes up to bite you in a game like this.
It feels like the net and KenPom correlate very closely. And I remember Missouri last year, I think, was heading into the NCAA tournament, mid to low 40s, maybe in both. And it's what you said. They won a lot of close games against some mediocre teams, but they kept winning. And you have to reward winning, as long as your net's in a certain spot. And theirs was good enough to get in the tournament, right? But eventually you start, the law of averages comes for you over time. And maybe this is the year for Missouri. Maybe it's not. Look, we're not even to Thanksgiving yet. So speaking on this is very premature. But the concern that I've had for them is that I just am not sure, because you look at them last year and it was Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge, and those guys could score in buckets. And some of that, it's Dennis Gates' system. It endears scorers to scoring a lot of points. But you look at this team this year, and I don't know that they've got a guy on the floor that can give you what those two guys gave you last year. And defensively, that's not going to be where their bread's going to be buttered. And I think their best chance to have an elite scorer based on history is John Tonje. He gives them 5 points yesterday. I'm just not sure they've got the top-end firepower that they had a year ago. Now, we saw it in the opener, but that was against weak competition, and that is kind of my concern for them going forward. We know that they're not going to be top 10 nationally KenPom in defensive efficiency, but they might be offensively under Dennis Gates. But they got to have the parts, and I don't think the parts are there like they were a year ago.
No, they need much more balanced scoring this year. Whereas last year, you get away with some games where Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge could go off for 25 each. I just don't think you're going to see that often this year on this team. Because like I said, I think ideally you have guys, that were in complementary roles last year now having to step into bigger roles. And it's been an adjustment. And it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Like we said, we've seen Sean East have double-digit games. We've seen Nick Honor have double-digit games. We know Noah Carter can. Could be Tonje, could be Bates, could be all these other guys. Grill had 15 in this game, something like that. They can all do it, but I think the problem is going to be they're going to have to all do it. Where I think it's going to be really hard for some games for certain guys just to not score a lot. They're going to need 5 guys chipping in double figures most games, because I like you said, I don't think they have just that complete takeover type player that could do it to a level. Not that they don't have anybody who can do it. I don't think they can do it to the level of Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge. That's where, when I talked about Missouri in the preseason, that's what I led with every time. I started with the negative. I said, they don't have a Kobe Brown or Demoy Hodge on this roster. I said, but they have depth. They have options. And if they connect it all together, they can get there. But they're just not there yet. And like you said, they've got time. 5 games in the season. Long way to go. But I think we just have to put it in the context of, you need to separate last year from this year. 2 completely different teams. And this team is working through a lot more things, I think, at times than that team last year. Even though there were some of those times last year, but it just wasn't to this extent, losing a game like this at home. You just don't expect that.
All right, I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a minute and see if you can get this. And I think it'll tell us a lot, especially if you don't. Missouri's top 3 scores in terms of points per possession, in terms of what they did a year ago. See if you can guess the top 3
from last year's team.
Yeah, and the reason I like this, it's a nerdy stat and everything, but it kind of tells me like, okay, is there a guy that can go from being a complimentary scorer like you were on this team last year when you had Hodge and Brown around to be that guy who can take a step up? In other words, if they've shown that propensity in the time they got to do that, who do you think their top 3 were a year ago in terms of scoring the most points per possession when they were on the floor? And not necessarily at Missouri. This could be other places.
I don't know. I mean, I assume Brown, Hodge, Golston, maybe. I don't know.
No, I'm talking about on this year's team. I'll just give it to you.
Oh, you're talking about last year. Okay.
Sorry. John Tonje, 19.7 per 70 possessions a year ago. Connor Vanover, 19.6. And Noah Carter, 17.5. Followed by Carolero for whatever that's worth. And did he even play yesterday? Yeah, he played 18 minutes. So Tonje was your best scorer. He gives you 5 yesterday. Vanover gives you 2 points in 3 minutes. And I never know where that's going to go.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's unrealistic.
It's always varied.
It's unrealistic to think that Vanover was going to be a top.
No. But he can step out and hit the 3, and he's done it before. Like he would play minutes for Eric Musselman at Arkansas, then he just disappeared as Muss found other things. Yeah. He went to Oral Roberts, which was a great fit because he could be on the floor a lot. In fact, he played a year ago. He played 875 minutes, which is a pretty good chunk of playing time. So, yeah, I mean, the guys that were their biggest scorers a year ago, again, some of that was other places, have not always been stepping up for them.
Well, I'll wrap it up with this. Where was Missouri elite last year? Where were they in college basketball? Where were they the best in certain areas?
Well, they got a ton of steals.
They were one of the best at forcing turnovers. They were one of the best at taking care of the ball. They were one of the best in terms of their offensive efficiency numbers. And they were also pretty good. Like those were the biggest areas last year. And they were also one of the most experienced teams in the country last year. This year, where are they elite?
I don't have Ken Palm in front of me, so you'll have to tell me.
Their best attribute is, I guess, blocking shots and making free throws. Everywhere else, they're pretty, they're good in some areas. They're bad in other areas, but they're not like that top level elite category. Still a very experienced team. But like they're not, that's the difference so far, right? And again, a long way to go to get those numbers up, but they aren't just completely stand out in any area right now. Whereas last year you could tell right off the bat, my goodness, this team was playing close games.
Yeah.
But they were scoring 90-something points. I think it's going to be hard for this team to reach that number consistently this year until we see how the offense evolves. So,
yeah, and it's been – they're kind of still in the experimentation stage. I mean, we've seen Tamar Bates have a big night at times. It was talked that he was a better fit on this team than he was at Indiana. I mean, it's not like they're lacking for parts. I'm just not sure the parts at the top end are what they had a year ago.
Long way to go. Everyone knows I have confidence in my client, so
you do, and it's generally well founded. I think there's going to be better days from Missouri.
I would agree with that.
All right, that's a wrap on today's show. We've got a ton of college basketball content, ton of football content. It's a busy week between rivalry week and football, and just between all the Thanksgiving week slate of games. We'll have you covered on all of that, even if one of us is on vacation. So be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell a friend. For Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. This has been Southeastern 14 presented by Bet